Thank you for watching WISD TV, and thanks also for visiting the Waco ISD and Baylor University websites. My name is Dale Caffey, Director of Communications with the Waco Independent School District. It is my pleasure to be in the office of Dr. Jon Engelhardt. He is the Dean of the College of Education here at Baylor University. And Dr. Engelhardt, we're here specifically to talk about the Greater Waco Area Superintendents Group. A group that you're a member of.
That's correct.
Obviously, you're not a superintendent. You're the dean of the School of Education here at Baylor, but you're an integral member of that group. Tell me a little bit about what that group is all about.
Well, the group has lots of purposes for it. It is dominantly a way for the superintendents from this area to get together and to be a network to each other, to support each other, and to consider common actions where they're appropriate and in everyone's best interest. They're really about building a sort of common sense of what public education needs to be about for the greater Waco area. So they all do similar jobs, they all have similar issues, but the world divides us up into school districts, and so they end up being left to their own devices. They tend to be off in their own world. And this was simply an opportunity to try to bring those worlds together. One of the things I know as a dean is that if you look at your peer group, there aren't very many of them that you can let your hair down with and talk to. And the superintendents have the same issue. And what is very helpful to them is to have a group where they can sit down and say, here's the problem I'm facing. And does anybody have a different way of coming at that than I've thought about? And so they really support each other with that. One sort of interesting outcome, which by being part of it I get to see, is when we have cold weather like we did recently and there has to be a decision about do we run the buses, do we start school late? They all get on email and start talking to each other to say, what are you planning to do? Here's what we're thinking about. And if you'll notice, in the recent years, there's been a much more coordination among the school districts in Waco area around when schools open and when they don't, and all sorts of decisions. And that's, of course, a minor point, but there are lots of others that are more subtle and in some ways even more important.
Dr. Engelhardt, talk about how this group got started.
Yeah, it was a little bit was serendipity, but right after I moved to Waco 7 years ago, I was in conversation with Roland Hernandez at Waco ISD, and it was an interest of mine to meet with all the superintendents in the area. And so I asked him if he wouldn't mind hosting a little reception or something like that, so I might get to know them all at one time. And when the group got together, I realized they didn't know each other any more than I knew them. And so I raised the question with them about would they like to continue meeting in this way with each other, and that I'd be very pleased to call them an advisory group for the School of Education, and that we might try to meet periodically. And it sort of went from there, and some people jumped in and said, hey, let's try to meet monthly. And actually that's how we got started with breakfast as well, because it was a great time to come together. It was before the workday really started for many of them.
Talk about a typical meeting.
Oh, well, a typical meeting is, first of all, it moves. Mm-hmm. We have 10 members. We meet monthly during the school year, which, counting me, makes 11 members. So we don't quite meet 11 months, so somebody gets a bye every year. But each school district hosts one meeting during the year, except for when they get a pass because there's not enough meetings.
Right.
And then as we go to those meetings, we start off by sharing breakfast and having informal conversations. And then whoever is hosting it sends out a note a week ahead of time and says, what are some issues, some things that questions you've got? What would you like to talk about? And their job is to put together a little agenda for the meeting and then sort of be the ringleader to run the agenda. And we cover anything and everything that is important, all the way from state issues to local issues to running buses and some new, like House Bill 5. In the most recent meeting, we had a discussion about House Bill 5 and some of the provisions and how different school districts were looking at that, who had contacted different people in the state to say, did you get what was your take on how this could or should be implemented? So it's those sorts of discussions that typically take place. There's also an opportunity within those to talk about how can we do work together, which leads, of course, to another kind of purpose that the group has.
Certainly. I want to mention that one of the reasons we're talking to Dean Engelhardt today is because a group called CREATE, that's an acronym for Center for Research and Advancement in Teacher Education, has given the Greater Waco Area Superintendents Group an award. So let's talk about how that came about.
Okay. CREATE is the teacher, the TE is the teacher education in the acronym. And one of their categories for recognitions is around partnerships, K-12 partnerships between school districts and schools of education. They have a variety of categories, and as I thought about it, I thought this wasn't really designed to be something that teacher education began. It was really more of an idea of how can we all work together. And so I thought, well, let's see if we can't use this as a way to get some recognition and get other people to understand the good things that are going on here in Waco among the school districts. And so I put together a little proposal, sent it in around partnerships, and they have 4 categories for partnerships, and they actually chose us in 3 of the 4 categories to be recognized. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
I'm not going to put you on the spot and make you name all 10 members unless you can do that. We know Waco ISD is a member, and we're certainly glad to be, but I'm assuming that it's just a circumference. If you drew a circle around Waco, the superintendents in this area are members of this group.
That's correct. The rule is that your school district has to border Waco ISD. And if you touch Waco ISD, then you're a, quote, legitimate member. The only reason we did that was, and we didn't start that way, we actually started with about 7 members, and then the others began to say, hey, what about, could we be included? The group decided that the size was important. That is, Region 12 has meetings that have 70 or 80 superintendents, and you can't have much of a conversation with 80 people in the room. And so while a few other school districts in the area have requested to be part of it, they really decided that we want to keep this a conversation that focuses on Waco and not other areas of the state. And so we've really kept it within that group. And as superintendents have come and gone over the last 6 or 7 years, their representation has maintained, and we have had the same 10 school districts for nearly the entire time.
More and more superintendents are getting together to try to offer students more opportunity. And one case is the Greater Waco Advanced Manufacturing Academy, which Waco ISD started but opens up to districts all throughout McLennan County. How important are things like that?
Oh, they're critically important. And in fact, while one could argue that Waco could have done that all by itself, Bonnie Kane is a marvelous leader, and she brought that issue to the Greater Waco Area Superintendents Group and said, here's an opportunity for us to collaborate. The kinds of things we're able to do, particularly the smaller school districts, can't really afford to do by themselves. And so she said, how can we work together with that? And people immediately got excited about it and worked up some plans to sort of come together around and embrace this notion of GWAMA, Manufacturing Academy. And of course, it's got a much bigger vision now than just manufacturing. But it really was through the inspired leadership of Bonnie Kane, but also through the camaraderie and the development that had happened over several years of people working together and trusting each other, that they all stepped forward and tried to find ways that they could all participate in that.
One of the functions of the group is to serve in an advisory capacity to you.
That is correct.
How important is it for the Dean of the College of Education at Baylor University to have this group giving you advice?
Well, I think it's very important. We're about preparing practitioners, whether we're talking about teachers or we're talking about school administrators, and actually a variety of other folks too. But it is very important for us to have that touch with the practicing profession. We see ourselves, and I think policy sees us as the practitioner preparation arm of the profession of education. And that means we really need to be in close contact. So I use them in the nicest sense of the word use, to get information about what their needs are, what obstacles, challenges they're facing, and really try to see, are there ways that we can be helpful. We actually see it in a somewhat broader sense as well, in that we think this is also our way to interact with the broader community of Waco. And so by working closely with schools, we are in fact working with the community, and we do, in addition to working with the superintendents, we try to work with the Education Alliance and a variety of other community elements, but the primary thrust of that is really working with the superintendents in the area.
Now, it's no great secret. In fact, we highly publicize the fact that your college is keenly involved on our campuses in professional
Absolutely.
development schools, but you're also in other schools too. Why don't
Yeah.
you talk about the fact that you not only have schools in Waco ISD, but also in some of these other member districts?
Yes. We dominantly place our students in what we call PDSs, professional development schools, and they are unique in lots of ways, in that they put requirements not just on what we do there, but requirements on the school districts to participate. So we work mostly with Waco ISD. We do that because we believe that our students need to be prepared to teach in school districts that have a significant element of poverty. If you think about teachers, if you can teach in schools that have some of the kinds of challenges that Waco has, you can probably teach anywhere. There are some differences, but you can probably teach anywhere. We also have a growing but small PDS relationship with Midway ISD. Mm-hmm. We believe that our teachers should not just have experiences in schools where there are struggles with poverty, but also in suburban schools. Right. So they are better prepared for whatever environment they end up teaching in. But even at that, we don't have enough placements for all of our what sometimes are called student teachers. We call them interns. Mm-hmm. When they get to the end of their program, and that's the entire senior year, I might add. So we work with other schools that we loosely call partner schools, and we for sure have placements in Robinson and La Vega and Conley, and of course Midway becomes in part of kind of double roles there. Right. With that, and occasionally with the other 10 school districts that make up the Greater Waco Area Superintendents Group.
Another thing that this group did was came up with a common legislative voice, if you will, to try to come together so that at least they could give some guidance to our state legislators from this area on what we really need. Right.
We had this discussion among the group around what might be some legislative priorities going into the 2012 legislative session. And the superintendents were not shy about having opinions about what needed to happen to support public education in Texas, and in particular the Waco area. But as we talked about that, we really said, you know, as superintendents and as dean, we look like we're self-interested when posing these positions. So we began to explore the notion of what if the school boards, who are dominantly business folks, professional folks, and that they should be more influential than those of us in leadership positions in actually working with members of the legislature. And with that, we pulled together all the members of the 10 local school boards en masse, and then eventually moved to representatives for that. And first of all, wanted to see, did they want to work together and adopt common positions? And if so, what might that be like, and what strategies might we use to communicate those? And that evolved into a set of priorities that was worked, part of which were worked into the city's priorities for working with the legislature as well. I might add that not more than a month ago, we had a follow-up meeting in anticipation of the 2014 legislative session. So this wasn't an event, this was at the beginning of a process. And we did the same thing. We adopted a series of positions, some of them rather different from the earlier set of positions. And this time that was with a representative of the local school boards. And as of this date, the school boards are all working on endorsing that set of positions. And we hope to move forward in working with the city and the county, again, in adopting positions on public education for the McLennan County, the Greater Waco area.
Well, one thing is for sure is that a strong public education system is so vital to the future of our country. And you realize that, you get that across in the School of Education here at Baylor University, and you're a member of this group. I want to thank you once again for everything that you do.
Oh, well, thank you.
And just talk, as we end here, talk about the importance of continuing to strengthen public education in Texas and throughout the United States.
Well, our country was built as a democracy with the assumption that we would have an educated populace. That in order to be a citizen that is that takes that responsibility seriously, one had to have an education so you could read about and understand the issues related to that. That has extended over the last 2 centuries or more, from what were originally sort of optional opportunities to compulsory opportunities, and that is so critical. I know there are lots of other movements that are important in education with charter schools, and of course we've always embraced private schools as a legitimate form of education in the United States. Right. So it's not about that it has to be public education, but for the masses of population in the United States, public education is what they can afford. Right. And we think we owe it to them, to all children, to do the best possible education possible.
Dean Engelhardt, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for what you do with the School of Education here at Baylor University.
Okay, happy to.
And once again, congratulations to the Greater Waco Area Superintendents.